Hi ladies. Well, thanks so much for bearing with me, but I'm coming at you today with our continued chapter reviews for Present Over Perfect, and we are on part 4, at least that's where I am officially. Bear with me, it is a snow day, so my kids are home and playing. And we have Christmas music going and kids playing football upstairs, but that's just hashtag real life, coach life. Okay, so part 4 begins with walking on water. I have only one thing to do, and that's to be the wave that I am and then sink back into the ocean. Fiona Apple. So she's talking about walking on water. I'm just going to tell you this chapter was pretty powerful for me, and I'm going to share with you a little bit of a story about what happened to me at the end of this chapter. She begins by talking about filters in her life and how filters, we all have them, and how they make everything look the same, right? So if you have a negative filter, then everything you look at will be viewed in a negative light. And so she talks about going through a process called Prayer of Imagination with a spiritual director at one point. And she realized during that session that she had heard the story about Peter walking on the water like hundreds and hundreds of times her whole life, right? And she had always focused on the negative part, the part where he failed, the part where he doubted, the part where he needed to be rescued, where he faltered, and then the scolding that she thought Jesus gave Peter. Now, what she realized going through that activity was that the rescue actually came first. And what a beautiful way to view that story, instead of through the negative failure, but through the rescue. And that once we remove our filters, it allows room for space. It allows room for God, to be viewed through that filter. So when we move filters, it frees God from our own negative, our own wounds and our own narratives. So my challenge is, what story have you heard over and over that perhaps you need to remove your filter from? What happened, interestingly enough, at the end of this chapter was, I think it was actually Sunday morning. So I had just finished this chapter, and the chapter ends with, tonight as I fall asleep, I'll picture myself walking on the water, and then I'll picture myself being rescued. So that's how that chapter ends. Well, coincidentally that morning, as I opened up my Bible for my scripture reading and prayer and journaling time, I opened up to Psalms chapter 4, verse 9, which actually reads, "In peace I will lie down and fall asleep, for you alone, Lord, make me secure." And when I read that, actually I think I read the Psalm first, and then I read this chapter, and it made me cry. Did you ever have a moment like that where it's such a profound God moment? You're like, holy moly, like he really will speak to you and speak to us if we allow ourselves the time to be with him and to be present and to be free from filters. And so that was a pretty cool moment on Sunday. I shared it with my daughter when she got up that morning. And so Psalm chapter 4, verse 9 is something that has given me peace throughout this week. As we go on, the next chapter is called Baptism. And here she sort of talks about communion and baptism and the connection between bread and wine. She says she's always considered herself to be a water person. And the cleaning and the cleansing, like she talks about the story about Pigpen and how he carried, the dirt with him everywhere he goes, and how through the waters of baptism we can be made clean. And that she knows that she ran her whole life through the to-do list and the craziness and the activities and the busyness. And in doing that, she never allowed herself to be seen for who she really was, and that she feared the silence. And I wonder how many of us truly can relate to that. And that when she finally allowed herself to sit in the silence is when she found love. And she encourages us to get to know our essential self, who we are at the very base, at the very core. This chapter she talks about, burning down the old to bring out the new. And so my question to you all is, what is it that you need to burn down in your current life in order to make way for the new? Because we cannot keep going on this journey without saying no to some things, to create space for our best yes, and to be fully present with our families. So that was a very beautiful chapter, and I'm continuing to reflect on that for myself, and I hope that you guys are too. The last chapter that I'm going to talk about today is Must Be Nice, and this is sort of a chapter about jealousy. I've heard this before, I forget which book it was, but basically, like, jealousy can be a powerful tool for us to really show us, like, what is it that we want, right? If you find yourself jealous about another person's apparent situation, it can be a very useful tool to show you, you know, what is it that you really want in your life. She says our darkest parts can be our teacher. So what is it that you guys want? Patience, peace, calm, Christ. Those are my words. And so if I find myself jealous, which I really don't think that I struggle with that too much. It may be that I see somebody else who appears to have one of those areas that I'm longing for in my life. And so what makes you jealous, and how can you use this to burn down the old parts of your life and rebuild and make room for new? Thank you guys so much for your patience. Share your takeaways and your thoughts on this as we go through, and I will bring you part 2 of chapter 4 later this week or this weekend. Thanks, you guys.